tell us, sir, how many witnesses you think should be called and how long will it take?
Our whole need for witnesses is probably, to be honest with you, could be pared down to the 10 or less range. We could do this whole trial by the middle of February, maybe even sooner with cooperation. The more stipulation, the less need for witnesses. But why do you need a witness? The whole point that we're trying to make is that in every trial that there has ever been in the Senate regarding impeachment, witnesses were called. If you did this show or any other show in town about the news and politics and you just read transcripts, people would not be engaged. There's a flavor to this case that can't be had by looking at the transcript. And the big problem I have, if we don't get to call meaningful witnesses, direct witnesses to the point, is that you're basically changing impeachment. Impeachment in the House is not the trial. Impeachment in the House is whether or not there's enough evidence to go forward to trial. In Judiciary Committee, we gave the opportunity for the President to call witnesses to explain his side of the story. He chose not to. We had a lot of sworn testimony that more than justifies a trial. The grand jury proceedings of Ken Starr, witnesses were called. That was not a trial. There's undeveloped testimony where witnesses would be needed. We chose not to call them in judiciary because we were not having a burden to prove him guilty there. We were just trying to get it to the Senate. So what I'm saying about witnesses is that if you take them off the table in the Senate, the next Judiciary Committee, the next independent counsel ought to do everything because they may lose the chance to present their case. That would be bad for impeachment law. That would be against precedent, and I hope that doesn't happen here. And quite frankly, I'm encouraged from the discussion I hear in there that the senators are acknowledging that there may be some witnesses. We do not want to drag this out. All of us are tired of it. The American people are tired of it, but I want to leave behind a clear record that the president committed perjury. He's saying vigorously he's innocent. I want to put a vigorous case on that he's guilty for the sake of the rule of law, for the sake of the truth, if nothing else. Obstruction of justice case can be talked about by lawyers, but it cannot be understood, the flavor of it, until you have the people who are involved in the middle of it. So you really get a flavor. This is about crime. This is not about personal behavior. And without witnesses, that doesn't come out. You can have 3 days of lawyers talking to each other on both sides, 16 hours of questions, and basically bore everybody to death, talk everybody to death. But when you have a witness who was there, who was engaged in it, who was in the middle of it, telling you about what they were doing and why, it's a totally different case, and it's the difference between getting the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. It's the difference to determine whether this is about criminal misconduct or some tawdry affair justifying censure versus removal. It's important this case be told in a way that makes sense for history.
Congressman, there's a lot of Democrats that say what it's going to do is create a circus in the floor of the U.S. Senate.
Without getting to the truth, it creates a circus for the law. Bill Clinton's testimony is a circus. He went into the grand jury and he replaced one set of lies with another set of lies. In the deposition, Paula Jones, he denied any relationship. I think he created a circus for the law. Nobody on the manager's team wants to demean the Senate, offend this jury. Sexual harassment cases are uncomfortable. That's why the behavior is illegal. What went on in the Oval Office is uncomfortable, but it's important to know whether or not it occurred in a way that makes the president a liar. And it's important.
Do you see calling any witnesses that we have not heard from yet?
Yes, absolutely. State of mind witnesses. There are witnesses who the president told stories to that are not before the Judiciary Committee in sworn testimony. When he left the deposition, he gave press interviews suggesting that he had no relationship. Remember in the grand jury, he explained his testimony to mean, well, they didn't ask me about oral sex. Sexual relations, the way I define it, did not include oral sex. We're suggesting that story is an afterthought. That story is a fraud after the dress came up. And from January to August, he was telling a lot of people that he had no relationship of any kind whatsoever. So his premise in the grand jury is false. It's a house of cards that will fall. Those witnesses need to come forward. Sidney Blumenthal was told a story by the president. The president knew or had reason to believe he'd be a witness in the grand jury. That story makes Monica Lewinsky the bad person. That story makes her a sexual predator demanding an affair, and he had to say no. That story is undeveloped. I want to know why the president told him that to begin with and what Mr. Blumenthal did with that information. There are witnesses you haven't heard from before that may help explain how deep the obstruction of justice case goes. Paula Jones' case involved other women who filed affidavits denying any relationship with the president. Some of them may in fact recant those affidavits to suggest there was a relationship, and the whole story may fit together in terms of obstruction. That is a possibility. I'm just asking every senator to vote your conscience. We will live with the rules because it is your show, but make sure when it's over there's a meaningful trial and we don't change the law of impeachment because of the political moment.
But shouldn't public opinion factor into whether a president is impeached?
Absolutely, public opinion. If I was a senator, I would want to do what's best for the nation. I would not convict this president because 80% of the public thinks he lied under oath. That's not fair to him. The only way I would convict this president is if I had competent, relevant, under oath testimony before me and I believed one witness over the other. It would be hard for me to convict somebody and put a record on their presidency unless I was sure that I believed A over B, and that's why I think you need to look some of these people in the eye. And yes, you should consider the good of the nation. What is this case about? Very quickly, you're a defendant in a civil rights lawsuit. You're accused of sexually harassing somebody. They want to know how you behave in the workplace. And while the lawsuit's going on, you're having a relationship with a 21-year-old intern, that you're engaging in past practices that we believe inappropriate if you believe the story. This is about a person out of control who took the law, turned it upside down. Every time there was a crossroads, he put his personal and legal interest ahead of the nation. He's the chief law enforcement officer of the land. He encouraged people to lie for him. He lied. I think he obstructed justice. I think there's a compelling case that he has, in fact, engaged in conduct that would be better for him to leave office than to stay in office.
How much does the Republican Party stand to lose, Congressman, if this trial drags on too long?
I think the Republican Party and the nation stand to lose if this trial doesn't get to the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. We have made decisions based on what we believe, competent evidence. We haven't looked at the polls. One thing you can say is that the Republican House and a handful of Democrats voted their conscience in spite of popular political opinion. The best thing for this nation is to get this over with, but not at the sake of doing it in a way that won't make sense, not for the sake of cutting corners, not to get it behind us on any terms, get it behind us on terms of honor. I can live with the verdict of the United States Senate no matter what it is. I only ask that we get a chance to make a persuasive case, the president be able to defend himself, and at the end of the day, it's a meaningful trial. The result will take care of itself. The process is just as important as the result.
But couldn't the Republicans lose the House?
The political consequences to the Republican Party in this situation are great. Who knows what's going to happen in 2 years? A lot of people are questioning what we did and why we did it. Partisanship was exhibited in this case. It was a party line vote. I believe people voted their conscience. You got a Republican conscience and a Democratic conscience in the House. I'm not here to tell you who's right or who's not, but I'm telling you that if you think we did this for partisanship, that's not true. Partisanship activity is designed to gain an agenda that you believe in. There is no way any Republican can say in good faith that this gained momentum for our party. This lost momentum for our party. This hurts our ability to enact our agenda. But we were in charge at a time the evidence came before the House that was compelling that the President of the United States is a grand jury perjurer, that he obstructed justice in a civil rights lawsuit. It happened on our watch. It has hurt us politically, but I do believe this is one of the finest moments of my party, and a handful of Democrats joined us to put the law over politics. I really believe that, and only God knows what will happen 2 years from now.
Congressman, is there a split among the House managers about the need for witnesses? George Gekas has said that he thinks the case could go on, you could put a solid case on without witnesses.
There is no split about the need to bring 10 or less witnesses to explain fully what happened and give a flavor of the case. Nobody wants to recreate the 60,000 pages. There is no need to call every witness who testified in the grand jury. There's a need to call a few who didn't testify. There's a need to develop the case in terms of testimony further, because neither proceeding, the grand jury or the Judiciary Committee, was meant to be a trial. We don't want to drag this out. I don't want to offend the jury. I don't want to offend the nation, but I don't want to leave behind a record that is just cold. The reason we have witnesses is to tell the story, and you sit there and evaluate people's demeanor. If you have a bunch of lawyers talking to you for